The midnight intruder, the wind screamed outside the cabin, carrying with it the sharp bite of winter. Snow pounded against the wooden walls and rattled the shutters as if the storm wanted to break inside. Daniel sat near the fire, a heavy blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He lived alone in the mountains, far from the nearest town. The storm didn't frighten him. He was used to it, but the strange sound he heard that night did. It was faint at first, a soft scratching at the door. He thought it might be the wind, or maybe a tree branch dragged by the storm. But then he heard it again, louder this time, a weak knock. Uneven and desperate, Daniel froze. No one came this far into the mountains in such weather. Slowly, he stood and reached for the axe he kept beside the door. His heart pounded as the knock came. Again. Softer, almost fading away. He took a deep breath, unlatched the door, and pulled it open. Snow rushed in, carried by the storm. And in the doorway, half buried in snow, was a figure. A woman, no, not a woman like he had seen before. Her skin glistened strangely under the pale moonlight, her eyes too large. Her features almost delicate, but not fully human. She trembled violently. Her lips blew from the cold. Her clothes were nothing more than torn fabric, barely clinging to her body. She collapsed forward, falling onto the floor of his cabin. Daniel jumped back, gripping his axe tighter. For a moment, he thought she was dead, but then she coughed. Weak sound, and whispered something in a voice that shook. Please. Fire. Warmth. Her voice was thin, filled with pain. Daniel's first instinct was to push her back outside. She was not human, and he had no idea where she came from, but the way she curled on the floor, the way her body shivered, made him hesitate. He shut the door quickly to keep the storm out. The cabin filled with silence, except for the crackle of the fire and her ragged breathing. She looked up at him, her wide eyes glowing faintly in the firelight. She tried to speak, her lips forming words he could not understand at first. Then she tried again, slowly, as if forcing herself to say it in his language. I can cook. I can clean. I can bear children. Just don't throw me out. Daniel's grip on the axe loosened slightly. He stared at her in shock. Her words were desperate. Not like an offer, but a plea for survival. She tried to crawl closer to the fireplace, dragging her weak body across the floor. Daniel finally set the axe down and moved forward. He grabbed a fur blanket from his chair and dropped it over her shoulders. She clutched it tightly, pressing it against her wet skin, as if it were life itself. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Daniel watched the snow melting off her hair and dripping onto the floor. She rocked slightly, whispering again, Don't throw me out. I will do anything. Anything you ask. His chest tightened. He had heard stories of aliens before, rumors from travelers who spoke of strange beings crossing into human lands. But he had never seen one himself, and now one was in his home, begging to stay. He crouched near her, but kept his distance. Who are you? He asked firmly. Her lips trembled. She shook her head, as if the answer didn't matter. No name. No home. Only cold, she said softly, her eyes filled with tears, shining in the firelight. If I go back outside, I die. Daniel clenched his jaw. He was not a man who trusted easily. Living alone in the mountains taught him that survival often meant suspicion. Yet looking at her, this broken creature who had risked everything just to find warmth, he felt torn. She pulled the blanket tighter and whispered again, her voice barely more than a breath. Cook for you. Clean for you. Bear your children. Just let me stay. Her words echoed in his mind. He could feel her fear, her desperation. He knew she was offering the only thing she thought had value, herself. For a long while, Daniel said nothing. The firelight flickered across the cabin walls. Outside, the storm howled louder, reminding him that if he pushed her out now, she would not last more than minutes. She watched him with wide, frightened eyes, as if every second of his silence was a knife in her chest. Her hands gripped the blanket so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Finally, Daniel sighed. He stood and stepped back. "Stay by the fire," he said quietly, "but if you try anything at all, you won't like what happens." Her lips parted, and for the first time since she entered, a tiny spark of relief crossed her face. She nodded quickly. Curling closer to the fire, she whispered, "Thank you. Thank you." Daniel turned away, but his mind raced. Who was she? Why had she come to his home? And why, deep in his chest, did he feel that letting her in was the start of something dangerous? The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin, another storm had just begun. A stranger by the fire. The fire burned steady, filling the cabin with warmth, but Daniel's eyes stayed on the strange woman huddled near the hearth. Her thin frame was wrapped in the fur blanket he had given her, steam rising from her wet hair as the heat pushed away the frost clinging to her. She sat trembling, her knees pulled to her chest, her gaze fixed on the flames as if she feared they might vanish. Daniel sat across the room, his axe leaning against his chair. His instincts told him not to trust her. She was not human, that much was clear, but she was no monster either. Her features, though alien, held a strange beauty. Her eyes were larger than his, with a glow that seemed to catch and hold the firelight. Her skin shimmered faintly, almost as if dusted with frost. For several minutes, neither spoke. The crackling fire and the howl of the storm outside were the only sounds in the cabin. Daniel finally broke the silence. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice steady but low. The woman turned her head slowly. Her lips parted, but the words caught in her throat. She pressed her trembling fingers to her chest. "No name," she whispered. "At least, not anymore." Daniel frowned. Everyone has a name. Her gaze fell to the floor. Her voice was so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Names are taken when you are cast out." The words struck him strangely. He had never heard anything like it. Cast out, like she was discarded, unwanted. That explained why she was alone in the storm. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her. "Where did you come from?" he pressed. Her breath shuddered as she spoke. "A clan beyond the ridge. They do not keep those who cannot obey." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "What did you do?" She flinched as if struck. Her hands gripped the blanket tighter. Her voice cracked. I refused to be bound to a lord." Her words hung heavy in the air. Daniel understood enough. Some kind of forced marriage, some bond she wanted. No part of she had chosen freedom over obedience, and for that they had thrown her into the snow. Her eyes glistened as she looked at him. "If I go back, they will kill me. If I stay outside, I freeze." She lowered her head, whispering, "That is why I came. That is why I begged." Daniel's jaw tightened. He could see the truth in her trembling body, in the bruises that peeked from beneath the blanket. Whoever she had fled from had not been gentle. Still, he could not ignore the danger. "Why here?" he asked. "Out of all places, why my cabin?" She hesitated, then lifted her gaze. Her eyes were wide, reflecting both fear and something like hope. "Because you are human," she whispered, "and humans sometimes show mercy." The words unsettled him. He had heard stories too, whispered among traders, that some alien tribes both feared and envied humans. Some claimed humans had a strange gift. They cared for the weak when others would not. He never put much thought into it, but now the proof sat shivering before his fire. The woman shifted closer to the flames. "I can work," she said quickly, desperate to prove her worth. "I can cook. I can mend things. I can keep your home clean." She swallowed hard. "I can give you children if you ask." Daniel stiffened. Her offer was raw, almost painful to hear. She was not flirting. Not trying to tempt him. This was survival. Her voice trembled with every word, like someone bargaining for her very life. "Stop," he said firmly, holding up a hand. "I don't want your promises." Her face fell, fear tightening her expression. "Then, you'll send me out." Daniel's silence made her shake harder. She pressed her forehead to her knees. Whispering rapidly in her own language, he couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the despair in them. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't say that," he muttered. "I just don't want this." He gestured vaguely at her desperate offers. She lifted her head, hope flickering in her eyes. "Then, I may stay." Daniel leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. He studied her carefully. "For now," he said slowly, "you stay. By the fire, you rest. But here, Meph, you try anything to hurt me, if you bring danger to my door." His hand brushed against the axe handle beside him. "You won't get a second chance." She nodded quickly, clutching the blanket tighter. "I will not harm you," she said in a rush. "I swear it." Her voice carried a kind of desperation that went deeper than fear of the storm. It was the desperation of someone who had lost everything. Someone who only wanted a place where they could breathe. Daniel leaned back, trying to calm the unease in his chest. He told himself he was only letting her stay until the storm passed, but deep down, he knew the storm outside was only part of the danger. The real storm sat across the fire, her wide alien eyes fixed on him with a mixture of fear and fragile trust, and for the first time in years, Daniel realized his cabin was no longer just his own. The offer of survival morning came slowly, the storm outside still raging. The cabin creaked under the weight of snow, but inside the fire still burned. Daniel woke early, as he always did. But this time he wasn't alone. The stranger was still by the fire, wrapped in the fur blanket. Her breathing was steady, but her body twitched as if even in sleep she feared the cold would return. Daniel watched her for a long moment. His life had been quiet for years, filled with hard work and silence. Now, overnight, everything had changed. There was an alien woman in his home. One who had begged him not to throw her out. One who had offered everything she had just to survive when she stirred. Daniel stood and stepped back. She blinked at the fire, her large eyes reflecting the orange glow. Slowly, she sat up. Clutching the blanket to her chest, her voice was hoarse but steady. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel didn't reply. He moved toward his small shelf, pulling down a pot and some dried meat. He set it by the fire and began to cook. The smell of broth soon filled the cabin. Her eyes followed his every movement, hunger clear in her gaze. Finally, she whispered, "I can cook, if you allow." Daniel looked at her sharply. "You're too weak," he said. "Rest," but she shook her head. "I must prove I am worth keeping." Her words were heavy. Each syllable carried desperation. She pushed the blanket aside and crawled closer. Her hands trembled as she reached for the pot. Daniel hesitated, then handed her the spoon. She stirred carefully, adding bits of herbs from the shelf. Her movements were shaky, but there was skill in the way she handled the food. When the broth was ready, Daniel tasted it. To his surprise, it was good, better than what he usually made. The woman lowered her gaze, whispering, "I told you. I can cook." She ate little herself, pushing most of the food toward him. "You need strength," she said softly. "You keep fire, you keep home, you protect." Daniel frowned. "You need food more than me." Her lips curved in a small, tired smile. "If you live, I may live too," for a moment. Daniel felt the weight of her words. She wasn't speaking about kindness. She was speaking about survival, to her. His life meant her chance to stay alive after they finished. She cleaned the pot without being asked. She moved slowly, still weak from the cold, but determined. Daniel watched her silently. She was proving herself just as she promised. Later, As the storm howled outside, she sat by the fire. Her arms wrapped around her knees, she lifted her gaze to him and spoke carefully. "I will not be a burden." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And how will you stop that?" "You're already here. You've already changed everything." She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "I can do more. I can mend clothes. I can tend to wounds. I can keep this place warm and alive." Her voice dropped, her words trembling. "And if you wish, I can bear your children." Daniel stiffened again. The way she said it wasn't seduction. It was the same desperate offer as before, spoken like a bargain at the edge of death. "Stop saying that," Daniel said firmly. "I don't need her." Eyes filled with tears, she shook her head, cutting him off. "It is how my people survive," she said quickly. "A woman without a bond has no place, no safety. She must give everything. Or she is thrown away." Her voice cracked. "I was thrown away." The cabin grew quiet. Daniel stared at her. She wasn't lying. He could hear the truth in every word. She had been cast out because she refused to give herself to someone she didn't want. And now she believed the only way to survive was to offer herself again. Daniel's chest tightened. He had never lived with anyone else, never thought about sharing his home or his life. But seeing her trembling by the fire, tears slipping down her face, he realized she wasn't trying to tempt him. She was begging him not to let her die. She pressed her forehead to the floor, her voice breaking. "Please, let me stay. I will. Do anything. Just don't send me back to the cold." For a long time, Daniel said nothing. The storm outside roared, shaking the cabin. He could see the snow piling high against the door. There was no way she would survive out there. He rubbed his hand over his face, torn between caution and something deeper. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough. "You stay, but on my rules." Her head lifted slowly, her wide eyes shining with hope. "Rules," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "You don't lie to me, you don't bring trouble here, and you stop offering yourself like some bargain." He looked away. "I don't want a servant, and I don't want." He trailed off, shaking his head. She clutched the blanket, nodding quickly. "I will not lie. I will not bring danger, and I will not speak of it again." Her words were shaky, but filled with relief. Daniel exhaled, settling back in his chair. "Then you can stay by the fire until the storm passes." Her lips trembled, and she lowered her head, whispering, "Thank you, human." But even as relief softened her face, Daniel felt unease twisting in his chest. He knew storms always passed, but something told him her presence would not be so easily swept away. Shadows of the past the storm did not let up for days. The cabin became their world, with the fire at its heart. Daniel kept busy with his usual work, chopping wood, checking traps, mending tools, but he was always aware of her presence. The woman moved quietly, almost like a shadow. She cooked, cleaned, and made herself useful without being told. It was as if she feared that a moment of idleness might send her back into the snow. At night, while Daniel pretended to sleep, he would sometimes hear her. She sat close to the fire, whispering in her strange tongue. Her voice was soft, broken by pauses. Sometimes it sounded like prayer, sometimes like sorrow. He never asked what the words meant, but the sound of them settled deep inside him. One evening, when the storm beat hardest against the cabin, Daniel finally spoke. His voice cut through the silence. "Why did they cast people out?" The woman froze, her large eyes lifted toward him, shining in the flicker of firelight. She hesitated, but then her shoulders slumped. She drew the blanket tighter around her. Her voice trembled as she answered, "Because in my people's eyes, obedience is life." Daniel frowned. "And you disobeyed." She nodded. Her fingers twisted into the fur. "They wanted me bound to a warlord. His name was Carix. He already had many women, but he wanted more. My father." my clan. Said it was honor, said it was survival. Her voice broke. But I did not want him. I refused. Her words hung heavy between them. Daniel could see the pain etched into her every movement. He pictured her standing before her clan, refusing. The demand of a powerful man, he pictured their anger, their cruelty. And the snow that awaited her, they called me useless. She whispered, her voice raw. They said a woman who will not obey has no worth. They stripped my name. They cast me into the storm. If I live or die, it does not matter to them. Daniel clenched his jaw. Anger burned in his chest. He had seen cruelty before, men beating others for being weak. Leaders throwing lives away in war. But this was different. To throw away someone because she chose her own path. It made his stomach twist. And now, she said with a bitter laugh, I am here, offering myself to you, begging for scraps. I am no better. Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. You're wrong? Her head snapped up, her wide eyes searching his. Wrong? You chose, Daniel said. You didn't let them decide your life for you. You fought back, even if the cost was exile. He paused, his gaze steady. That makes you stronger than they ever were. For the first time since she entered his home, she looked at him not with fear, but with something like surprise. Her lips trembled, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her. But the moment passed quickly, her eyes dropped to the fire again. Strong, she whispered bitterly, and yet here I am, crying at your fire. Waiting for you to throw me away. Daniel said nothing, but inside, something shifted. He realized that keeping her here was no longer just about survival or pity. It was about defiance against those who thought they could discard her life as if it were nothing. Later that night, Daniel woke to another sound. It wasn't the storm this time, it was her. Her body shook as she wept silently. Her face buried in her hands, she tried to hide it, tried not to wake him. But he could hear every broken sob. He didn't move, he stayed still on his cot, but his chest tightened. He wanted to speak. To tell her she was safe here, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he lay there, listening, until her sobs faded into whispers again. The next morning, Daniel found her outside. She had taken his old knife and was working on one of the broken traps. Her hands were clumsy, but she was trying. Her breath puffed white in the cold air. Snow still swirling lightly around them. You don't have to do that, Daniel said, stepping closer. She glanced at him, her eyes tired but determined. I said I will not be a burden, she answered. I keep my word. Daniel studied her for a long moment, the scars on her arms, the bruises that had not yet faded. The stubborn will in her eyes, it all painted a picture of someone who had been beaten down again and again, but refused to vanish. You're not a burden, Daniel said quietly, surprising even himself. Her breath caught, she turned away quickly. But not before he saw the shimmer of tears in her eyes. That night, as the fire crackled and the storm slowly began to weaken, Daniel caught her staring into the flames. Her face was calm, but her eyes held shadows. He realized then that her past was not finished with her. The warlord she had fled from, the clan that had cast her out, they would not simply forget. And in the silence of that long night, Daniel knew that keeping her meant more than just sharing his fire. It meant he might one day have to fight her shadows. A dangerous bargain. The storm eased at last. Leaving behind a world buried under white silence, Daniel stepped outside at dawn, his boots sinking deep into the snow. The air was sharp, each breath turning to mist. He looked around carefully, scanning the tree line. Something in his gut told him the quiet was only a mask. Inside, the woman still nameless to him tended the fire. She had begun to move with more confidence, cooking without asking. Mending his worn coat with thread, she pulled. From old cloth, it was as if she wanted to erase any doubt that she was useful. Daniel carried in a small haul of frozen rabbits from his traps. Her eyes lit up when she saw them. She quickly prepared a stew, filling the cabin with a smell richer than it had known in years. When they ate, Daniel finally spoke. "You don't need to prove yourself every minute." She looked at him across the fire, her large eyes steady. "I do," she said simply. "If I do not, you will send me away." Daniel set down his bowl. "I told you, you can stay." Her lips trembled with a faint, sad smile. Men always change their minds. The words stung. He didn't reply. But inside he felt the weight of what she said, whoever she had known. Before, they had left her with deep scars that no storm could match. Later that day, Daniel was sharpening his axe when he noticed her standing by the window. Her face had gone pale, her body stiffened. "What is it?" Aki asked. She turned slowly, her voice a whisper. "They will come." Daniel frowned, setting the axe down. "Who?" "The hunters," she said, her voice shaking. "Carrick's will not let me go. He will send men to find me." Daniel's chest tightened. He had known this was coming. He had seen it in her haunted eyes, in the way she flinched at shadows. "And if they come here?" he asked. She lowered her head. "They will demand me back if you refuse. They will kill you." Daniel studied her carefully. Her words carried no exaggeration, only grim certainty. That night, as the wind whispered outside, she moved close to the fire and whispered, "You risk much by letting me stay." Daniel's voice was low but firm. "I knew that when I kept you." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes glistening. Then she said words that made his heart twist. "Then, let me make a bargain." He frowned. "What kind of bargain?" Her hands clutched the blanket around her. Her voice trembled. "I will be bound to you. By my people's law, if I am yours, they cannot take me back. Not without breaking their own code." Daniel's brows furrowed. "Bound. Like marriage." She nodded slowly. "Yes, a bond of survival. I would cook, work, and give you children. I would belong to you, and in return, you protect me." Daniel stared at her in silence. Her offer was raw, her voice heavy with desperation, but also a strange kind of resolve. She was offering her life, her future. Not for love, but for safety. He shook his head. "That's not how it works here." Her wide eyes filled with confusion. "Then how does it work, human?" Daniel exhaled, running a hand across his face. "We don't bind someone just to survive. We choose. We build trust." She flinched, her voice breaking. "I don't have time to wait if I am unbound when they find me. I am nothing, they will drag me back. And this time I won't escape." Her words hit him hard. He saw the fear trembling in her body, the way her hands shook as she clutched the blanket. She wasn't trying to trick him. She was terrified. Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "Listen, I don't need a bargain. You stay because I said so. Not because you offer yourself, not because you beg, but because I choose it." She stared at him, stunned into silence. No one had ever spoken to her that way. Finally, her lips trembled and tears welled in her glowing eyes. "Then you already made the bond," she whispered, almost to herself. Daniel looked away, uneasy. He had not meant it as a bond, but to her people, perhaps it was, that night. The cabin felt heavier, the air thick with unspoken words. Daniel lay awake on his cot, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the world was silent under the snow, but his mind was not. Sometime in the deep hours, he heard movement. He rose quietly, hand on his axe, and looked toward the window, his breath caught in the distance, faint but real. Lights moved between the trees, flickering like torches. He tightened his grip on the axe. His suspicion was right. They were not alone in the mountains anymore, and as he turned, He saw her watching the lights too. Her eyes wide with terror, she whispered one word that chilled him to the bone: Carex. The hunters arrived. The silence of the snow-filled forest shattered with the glow of lights. Daniel stood by the window, his hand tight on the axe handle. His breath came out in white clouds as he stared into the night. The figures moved closer. Slow and certain. They weren't travelers lost in the storm. They were hunters. The woman pressed herself against the wall, her face pale. Her wide eyes glowed faintly in the dim firelight. She whispered the name again, Carex, as though... The sound itself carried death. Daniel turned to her. How many will there be? Her voice shook. 3, maybe 4. They do not come alone. They will search. They will smell me even through the snow. Daniel's chest tightened. He had fought men before, but never alien hunters. And yet, he could not force himself to push her out. She was trembling, clutching the fur blanket as if it were her last shield. The first knock came like thunder, a heavy fist against the wooden door. The cabin shook. A deep voice growled in a tongue. Daniel didn't understand. Then the words shifted into broken human speech. Open, human. You shelter what is ours. Daniel stood still, his axe heavy in his hands. He glanced at the woman. Her body shook as she whispered, If you give me, they leave you. If you keep me, they kill you. Her words were sharp, honest. She expected him to choose the easy way. But Daniel's jaw clenched. He stepped closer to the door, his voice steady. This is my home, he called, and no one takes anything from it. A low growl answered. Then the door shuddered under a second blow. Wood cracked. The hunters were not going to wait for an invitation. The woman dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his arm. Please, she begged. Do not fight them. You will die. I cannot. Bear it if you die for me. Daniel looked down at her terrified face, and he felt something inside him harden. Then don't waste my fight, he said firmly. Stay low, stay hidden. And no matter what happens, don't open that door unless I tell you. She stared at him, tears welling in her glowing eyes. Her lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but the words never came. She nodded, her hands trembling as she pulled herself back toward the hearth. The door burst inward, splinters flying. Across the floor, snow and cold air flooded the cabin. 3 massive figures stepped inside, towering over Daniel. Their skin was rough, marked with tribal scars. Their eyes glowed faint like hers, but colder, crueler. The lead hunter's gaze swept the room until it fell on the woman. He grinned, baring sharp teeth. There you are, little runaway. The woman cried out, pressing herself against the fire. No, she whispered. Please, no. Daniel stepped between them, his axe raised. His voice was low but firm. She's not yours. The hunter laughed, a deep, cruel sound. Human, he growled. You are weak. You live alone in your wooden hole. Do not stand between a lord's claim and his prize. Daniel's grip tightened. Then maybe the Lord should come himself, he said coldly. Not send cowards to do his work. The hunter's grin twisted into a snarl. With a roar, he lunged forward. The cabin erupted into chaos. Daniel swung the axe, the blade catching the hunter's shoulder. Blood sprayed across the snow-covered floor. The alien howled in rage. Daniel staggered back, his heart pounding. The other 2 hunters closed in, surrounding him. The woman screamed, clutching a burning log from the fire. In desperation, she swung it at one of the hunters. Flames licked across his arm, and he recoiled. With a roar, for a moment, the fight broke into fragments: snow, blood, fire, and the crack of wood splintering. Daniel fought with everything he had. His body ached, his lungs burned, but he refused to step aside every time a hunter came close to the woman. He blocked their path. His axe clashed against claws. and bone, the sound ringing sharp in the small cabin. One hunter fell, his chest crushed by Daniel's swing. The others growled, circling like wolves. "You fight like death itself," one hissed, "but you will still break." Daniel spat blood onto the floor. "Then try." The lead hunter lunged again, knocking Daniel back against the wall. The axe slipped from his hand. The alien raised his clawed fist, ready to strike, but before the blow landed, the woman hurled herself forward, her small body slammed into the hunter, the burning log striking across his face. He howled in fury, stumbling back. His skin scorched, Daniel grabbed his fallen axe, surging to his feet with a roar of his own. He swung the blade with every ounce of strength left in him. The axe bit deep. The hunter collapsed to the floor, unmoving. The cabin fell silent, except for their ragged breathing to hunters dead. One wounded and retreating through the broken door. His glowing eyes glared with hate. "This is not over," he snarled. "Carrick's will come for her, and then you both die." He vanished into the snow, leaving only blood and broken wood behind. Daniel leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. The woman crawled to him, her face streaked with tears. She clutched his arm, whispering, "You fought for me. You nearly died." Daniel looked at her, his breath still heavy. "I told you," he said, his voice rough. "This is my home. No one takes anything from it." Her eyes shone with tears. But behind them was something new, something stronger than fear. "Then I am yours," she whispered. "Not by bargain, not by force, but because you chose me." Daniel didn't answer. He simply held her close as the fire burned behind them, knowing this was only the beginning. A new bond forged in fire. The night dragged on heavy and silent after the battle. The cabin smelled of smoke, blood, and cold air slipping through the shattered door. Daniel sat slumped against the wall, his axe still clutched in his hand. His body ached from bruises and cuts, but his eyes stayed sharp. He knew the fight wasn't finished. The woman moved around the cabin quickly, though her hands trembled. She pressed rags to his wounds, whispering words in her alien tongue. Her glowing eyes shimmered with both relief and fear. She spoke softly in broken human speech. "You fight like no one I have seen," she said. "But more will come. He will come." Daniel forced a bitter laugh. "Let him," he muttered, though deep down he knew the danger. If Carrick himself came, he would not be easy prey. As dawn broke, the snow outside glittered under the pale sun. Daniel stepped out of the cabin with his axe on his shoulder. His breath rose like smoke as he studied the tree line. The wounded hunter's threat echoed. In his head, they would not give up. By midday, the sound came a deep, heavy thud that shook the ground. Daniel's grip on the axe tightened. He turned to see figures approaching. Not 3 this time, not 4. A dozen armored warriors marched through the snow, and at their head, tall and broad-shouldered, came Carrick's. The woman gasped, her face going pale. She stumbled back inside, her body shaking. "It is him," she whispered. "The Lord, the one who cast me out." Carrick's voice carried across the snow like thunder. "Human," he roared. "You took what is mine. You kill my hunters. You dare stand in my way." His glowing eyes burned with fury as he stepped closer, his warriors spreading out behind him. Daniel planted his boots firmly in the snow. His cabin stood. Behind him, smoke rising from its chimney. And inside was the woman who had begged him for life. He raised his axe, his voice low but steady. "She's not yours," Carrick laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Everything is mine if I choose it. She was worthless to us, but she is not yours either. Step aside, human, or be crushed." Daniel's heart pounded. He was outnumbered, outmatched, but something stronger than fear burned in him. He had lived his life alone, silent and distant. Yet now, for the first time, someone depended on him, and he would not give her up. The woman suddenly stepped outside, clutching the blanket around her thin body. Her voice trembled, but carried through the cold air. "I chose," she cried. "I chose him. I will never return to you." Carrick's face twisted with rage, his hand raised, signaling his warriors forward. "Then you both die." The ground shook as the hunters charged. Daniel gritted his teeth. His axe gleamed in the pale sun. He let out a roar and rushed to meet them. The first clash rang out loud, steel and bone striking in the snow. The fight was brutal. Daniel fought. With every ounce of strength left in his body, he swung his axe in wide arcs, each blow fueled by raw will. The woman stayed near the cabin, hurling burning wood and stones, her cries echoing. One by one, hunters fell. But the weight of numbers pressed hard. Daniel stumbled, his breath ragged. A heavy strike knocked him to his knees. Carrick's loomed over him, towering like a mountain. His clawed hand reached for Daniel's throat, but before the blow landed, the woman hurled herself forward, clutching a sharpened stake of wood she had torn from the cabin wall. With a desperate cry, she drove it deep into Carrick's side. The warlord roared in pain, his massive body twisting. Daniel seized the moment. He grabbed his axe and swung upward with all his might. The blade struck true. Carrick staggered back, blood spraying across the snow. He fell with a thunderous crash. His warriors freezing in shock. Their leader's glowing eyes flickered once, then went dark. The hunters looked at one another, fear breaking their fury. One by one, they turned and fled into the trees. Leaving their fallen lord behind, the forest swallowed them, silence falling heavy again. Daniel collapsed to one knee. Gasping for air, the woman rushed to him, her hands on his shoulders. "You live?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You live." He looked at her, exhausted but alive. His voice was rough. "So do you." She clutched him tightly, her body shaking. "You fought for me. You gave me more than fire, more than shelter." Her voice broke. "You gave me life, when no one else would." Daniel slowly wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close for the first time in years. He didn't feel the silence of the mountains pressing down. He felt something else: connection, purpose. The woman pressed her forehead to his chest, whispering words he barely understood. "I am yours now. Not by bargain, not by force. By choice, by bond." Daniel exhaled, his eyes drifting toward the cabin that had once been his prison of solitude. Now it was something else entirely. "Then we'll face whatever comes together," he said quietly. The fire inside the cabin still burned. The snow still fell. But for Daniel, the world had changed. He had opened his door one night to a desperate stranger, and in that choice, he had found more than he ever expected. And as the woman clung to him, her eyes glowing with both fear and hope, Daniel knew the truth. His life would never again be lonely, and their bond, forged in blood and fire, would stand against any storm.